like a little baby.
Little baby Jordan Klein Jr. Oh, you're so cute. You're
Oh,
so
he's gonna have a
cute.
cute baby someday.
Oh my
Asian
God,
babies,
it's
come
gonna be
on.
absurd. So there's this baby that Melanie's friends with this chick, Linda Hanj. So she's Chinese. Her husband is Danish of Asian descent, like a mixture. And their baby is the cutest thing that I have ever seen in my entire lifetime.
I
It's the
believe it.
best looking baby. I almost stole it when they came over. Like I was like, I will take your child with me.
Be careful, Jordan Klein. Once you have babies, Eric might steal it.
Mr. Steal Yo
You
Baby.
say that
Yeah.
we're live?
Oh, there
We're
you
live
go.
right now.
Normal stuff.
Welcome
Good
to
conversation.
the NFL Ownership Strategy Show for Week 11, sponsored by Prize Picks. I'm your host, Neil Orfield. You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. I'm here with Eric Lindquist. You can find him on Twitter at Eric Lindquist. And if you haven't picked up on it, Jordan Klein is our producer. You can find him on Twitter at Jordan D. Klein. Eric, you are fresh returning from a trip to New York City. It looked like you met some celebrities. I saw a picture of you with Kenan Thompson from Saturday Night Live. But more importantly, I also saw you in a picture with Greg Arenberg. And I hear that you got to meet some of the Arenberg family. How many members of Greg's family did you get to meet?
So I didn't actually take a picture with Greg in New Jersey. I took a picture with him last year. It would have been last summer. We did the Stochastic retreat where we were all in Chicago. But otherwise, I took the train over to New Jersey, left Penn Station, went over and hung out with my guy, got some chicken quesadillas, because when you leave California, you just have to get chicken quesadillas in New Jersey. It was fantastic. But we ended up going back over to his house, kicking it, talking about sports cards with his brother for a while. He's going to help me out with some stuff because I got some cards that need to get sold in my near future. But I had a great, lovely afternoon there. Got to hang out with Ben Raza, have dinner with him and his lovely girlfriend. So that was an absolute blast. So shout out to the Raza family for coming out to see us in New York. But it was an all-around eventful trip. My wife had the movie premiere for Good Burger 2. She was in charge of the entire thing. It was smashed.
Wow.
Kenan Nickel from the All That days growing up. It was just an absolute fantastic time hanging out with them, drinking with them, having a great time. It was one of the cooler trips that a person could take.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty awesome. I forgot that you also got to meet Ben Rasa earlier in the trip. So you just got to meet all of our New York contingent. That's really cool to meet Rasa and Greg Arenberg. So you only met Greg's brother of his family. Was he the only other Arenberg you met?
Yeah, I was sad because Scuba, his dad, as he's affectionately known, I was really looking forward to meeting the man, the myth, the legend. Just wanted to ask him some zany questions and get some zany responses. But his brother, a very well-spoken, intelligent individual. Don't want to give the Arenberg family too much credit though, because he's still very mean to me on shows.
I was gonna say, like, I feel like when I hear about Greg's family and when I picture them, it's just like a bunch of different versions of Greg. Like they're all like kind of funny, smart. Like I don't know exactly how to describe it, but like, was that kind of true? Like, did his brother, was he similar to Greg, or sounds like maybe more serious than Greg? How would you say he was similar or different from Greg?
Yeah, definitely. I think Greg. I mean, Greg is. We all know that he's got a pretty good sense of humor with things, and Ben is pretty funny as well. But like, definitely, I don't know. I think a little bit calmer. Greg can get a little bit zany from time to time, but overall, it is kind of a astute way of looking at it. You have these different versions of the same family. This would be like calm, reserved Gregory would be Ben.
Okay, that's fun. Oh, his name was also Ben. So you met a couple Bens.
I did.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to meet the Arenberg family someday because they seem like a cast of characters. I guess mostly Scuba and Greg are maybe the characters, but would love to meet that family someday.
Yeah.
Guys, if you haven't already signed up for the Stochastic Hall of Fame, you can go to stochastic.com. I shouldn't say signed up because you can't just like sign up and you're in. You have to win your way into the Stochastic Hall of Fame. To do so, go to stochastic.com/avatar. Download that avatar, make it your avatar on DraftKings, FanDuel, wherever you're playing. Place in the top 3 of a contest with over 5,000 contestants. You got to tweet your win to @StochasticHOF, or if you're not on Twitter, you can email it to us as well. You'll win a free month of the Stochastic premium package of your choice. It's a fantastic thing. And of course, you get that shout out from Lofty as well. So if you want to be inducted into that Stochastic Hall of Fame, go to stochastic.com/avatar, make the Stochastic avatar your avatar, and tweet it out to us. Eric, should we start by taking a look at last week's winners. Start by maybe taking a look at the Millie Maker, take a look at the single entry spy lineup. Jordan, can you pull that up for us? The Millie Maker winning lineup?
I bet the Millie making winning lineup has a stochastic avatar next to it, if I had to guess.
It might. Who knows? Hard to know for sure if it will. You don't have it up already, do you, Jordan? Okay.
It's okay. No, it's all right. We'll kind of like talk through it here, because it's one of those things where the data and the person, they have to align. Like, you can't just take all user manual decisions into your hand. And I think I've been getting a little bit overconfident with some of the button clicking that I had been doing over the last couple of weeks. I've been seeing some success. Last week was a stone cold disaster, and the data was staring directly at you, saying play Dak Prescott. And it was such a leverage spot, considering Pollard was going to pull some type of ownership, not as much as maybe we might have been expecting. But it was a team that was a 17 and a half point favorite in a spot where there was no resistance on the Giants' end. This is just a broken down football team on par. Like, I would call them worse than the Arizona Cardinals at this point in time, with this version of Kyler Murray and James Conner coming out. So, like, I don't know what to say other than I screwed up, because the data said do this and I did another thing, and I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah, no, that's I mean, I think we all kind of did the same thing. Like, I played some of that Dallas stack, but like the data was just, it loved it. And still, I was just like, man, I just don't totally trust it. There are other spots that looked pretty interesting last week. So spread out a lot more. Let's do the I can't read what it says. Let's do the
closer. Look closer.
I can't read it. No matter
it's
how
like
close
forgetting Sarah Marshall, he's like,
blurry.
Get closer, get back, get closer, get back.
I don't remember that. Yeah. Let's do the 3 million. It's this one does not have the stochastic avatar. That's actually the other one, but this is the large field one. So figured we should take a look at. We got our guy Short Gamer TV won the 2.5 million one, but that was a little bit smaller field. This is the large field Millie, which friend of mine, Royal Pain 21. I've met him, I guess just once. I've only met him once. We talk a little bit, but he's a pro DFS player, great dude, and obviously one of the best players in the world. Good. Won the large field Millie this week. And I can pull up the lineup on my phone while you're pulling up there too. And as we've already alluded to, yes, it was a Dak stack with CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks. That was the part that was Brandon Cooks is 1.65% owned, even though it was only 4,200. He put up 35.3. That to me was one of our bigger misses of the week. Like, I was not on Brandon Cooks at all, and we clearly should have been, like, because we liked the Dallas stack, but most of us were just playing Dak with CeeDee Lamb with Dalton Schultz and kind of overlooked those secondary, tertiary.
John Ferguson.
I do that every single. I make that mistake constantly.
Just remember, John Ferguson is Rapid City Stevens legend. John Ferguson. That is what you need to remember. South Dakota's finest. Rolling it out there.
Now that you've told me that, I'm definitely going to remember to say the right name. I know who I'm talking about. I just for whatever reason, whenever I'm talking about the Cowboys, I can't stop myself from saying Dalton Schultz. But yes, John Ferguson, the tight end. We had Trey McBride, who just, man, that was a miss for me in best ball. Did you draft any Trey McBride in best ball, Eric?
I have a ton of Trey McBride in best ball.
Oh, lucky you. I did not. I was like, this guy is a bad, like everything that I heard was he's not that good. He's the second tight end on the Cardinals. I was like, I don't need to worry about that guy. And he is smashing 131
I think
receiving
for me,
yards.
It was like, we all expected Arizona to be a bad football team, right? Yeah. Like that, my thinking on this before the season was like, nobody wants to draft Marquise Brown at appropriate levels. I drafted him a lot. I drafted a ton of Trey McBride, mainly because I thought they could both get traded to contenders, or like Zach Ertz would get traded to a contender. And Marquise Brown, I thought that might be an upgrade for him getting traded somewhere. So I kind of drafted them, a lot of Cardinals, with varying reasons. James Conner, one of my highest owned running backs, purely because I think he's a bell cow whenever healthy. It just seems like that's what Arizona's going to do if they're 1-15 or if they're 15-1. It doesn't really matter. And it's hard to run into running backs like that in the NFL. I thought every Cardinal was a pretty good best ball target, but Trey McBride was my favorite purely because I thought Zach Ertz would get traded to a contender. The fact that they didn't do that and let him get hurt is so dumb. There aren't words for it.
So I was with you, loved that reasoning, and I followed it to a T. I was also like high on Marquise Brown, Rondell Moore, just for whatever reason. Yep. I just had a blank spot. It was a leak for me to not draft any Trey McBride, because in that last round, like seems pretty obvious at this point, but at the time I was just like, yeah, he's not that good anyway. So what's the best case? And of course, the best case is 131 receiving yards this week on 8 receptions. And he didn't even score a touchdown, just smashed without scoring the touchdown. So he's in there.
It's all right.
TJ Hawkinson.
So for every good best ball take you have, there's a bad one that you should just be kind of honest about. It's like, for me, the last round, I either took Trey McBride or Leonard Fournette every single time. And it's like Leonard Fournette can't break a snap with the Bills right now. So I don't know what to tell you.
Of those like undrafted running backs, Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott, and Kareem Hunt at the time, Leonard Fournette was the one that I was drafting. I was like, I'm fully out on Kareem Hunt, who's been pretty good. I'm fully out on Ezekiel Elliott, who's been pretty good for where it was going as well. So like those two were the better picks, and I was with you. I drafted. So there's another bad best ball take. Still going okay despite all these misses. But
I saw that you had some pretty good situations. I mean, if you avoided quarterback injuries, that's the worst part about the entire thing. It's like there's so much fluke luck that you just can't control that. So all you can do is control your side of the straight and, control your box, do what you can do to put yourself in a good place for success. But, it's one of those things for me. I think next year I just have to steer clear of the atmosphere over these running backs that aren't on football teams. I think that's been a big mistake I've made the last 2 years.
Yeah. With, what's his name? Will, the wide receiver is who I'm thinking of from last year. And
Will Anderson?
No, not Will. Maybe it's not Will. Maybe that's not what
right.
I mean. Will,
I'll think of it.
I can't think. Anyway, we'll get back.
Yeah, no. I know who you're talking about. It's the speedster that used to play for Houston. The guy with the dreadlocks. Can't remember off the top of my head right now. All
right.
We'll
get there. We'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, so this Millie Maker winning lineup, Rachaad White in it, didn't even have that great of a game. 17.8 fantasy points at 5,800 was fine. Najee Harris had a good enough game to be in the Millie Maker lineup, and now is replaced as a starting running back there, but had 82 rush yards, 14 receiving yards, and a rushing touchdown last week in this Millie Maker winning lineup. Keenan Allen, smash. TJ Hawkinson. Now, this is an interesting one because we were all in on TJ Hawkinson all week. And then we get the news on Sunday morning that he is going to be used sparingly only in like key situations, TJ Hawkinson. And then he goes out and he plays. I actually didn't look at the snap count, but he played enough to have 11 receptions, 134 receiving yards, and a touchdown. TJ Hawkinson was the smash of all smashes at 6% ownership. And we were there, at least for me. I was there all week until Sunday morning when we get the reports about him playing only in key situations. Got me off of TJ Hawkinson, and I wish it hadn't because he obviously smashed. And then interesting to see Cardinals defense, one that I loved last week. They only put up 3 fantasy points against the Falcons, still good enough to be in the Millie Maker winning lineup. So congrats to, man, I can't believe this lineup put up 260 fantasy points, because you look at it and there are plenty of like not that great plays. Rachaad White, 18 fantasy points, not all that great. The Cardinals defense only put up 3 fantasy points. I guess it's really just those just two that weren't like absolute smashes, but put up 260 fantasy points. Any notes about this one, Eric?
Yeah, maybe this is like an overview of like the way that I think about the Millie, and I haven't maxed the Millie for years now, but I generally will play something similar to it. I do NFL Live before lock every single Sunday. Try not to get carried away playing like max in the 5 and whatever else. I play primarily like a lot of 3 max, 5 max stuff over on DK. But one thing I constantly think about is like the need to be perfect. The need to be perfect is something that we all have and we all think we need to have when it comes to DFS. And that's just not true. And I think the Sims tool, when you go back and look at the post-contest simulator and see the sim lineups, you see what the sim ROI is. One of the cool things about the 555 winner when I was researching it was the guy who had the highest sim ends up being the guy who actually won as well.
No way.
Yeah, that never happens. But in the 555, that ended up being the case. And I think it's just like a lesson in the fact that like you can build strong lineups, put yourself in a good position every single week and not really worry about the results, because defense, we all know the variance that has. Some weeks you're going to have a 25-point defense that you need. This week was not one of those. You had Dallas that ended up just gigantically up. And, I think Van Der Esch being out and out for the season and possibly for his career now is pretty brutal. But there's a number of these guys from Dallas that they've started to get weeded out, and they didn't have their starters on the field for a fourth quarter, where it ends up kind of, taking a super chalk defense and dropping them down a peg. So I think it's a very fun lesson in the need to be perfect, something that we all have with DFS, but you don't always need on every single slate. It's all relative to how well the chalk performs, because if the chalk performs well, then everything else has to funnel in kind of perfectly around it or close to it. This is not one of those weeks. You saw a lot of chalk failure, and I think that those are the kind of weeks where I'm going to generally succeed, but yet I found a way to manage and screw up everything. So that was enjoyable.
That's a really good point about like not needing to be perfect. Because you look at these contests that have 200,000 people in them, and you think, oh, I need to like nail the absolute nuts, and that's not what happened at all. As somebody, as Adam Baumother says, it's crazy that Brian Robinson and Noah Brown were not in that Millie Maker winning lineup. He could have easily gotten him in there, beat this lineup by, I don't know, 30 fantasy points or something like that. Like there are huge upgrades to be made on this lineup. But when the chalk doesn't hit, especially, you don't really need to be perfect. And this is not a perfect lineup, but it's good enough to absolutely smash. And I think he won going away. I'm realizing as we're talking about it, though, that we should have pulled up the other one because of the point you just made about the winning, the best ROI lineup actually winning and it being a stochastic guy. Should have pulled that one up instead of the Royal Pen. But, I'm just used to looking at the large field
stuff. Totally get it.
And now, Jordan Klein is going to pull it up for us anyway. Take a look at that other one. Yeah, let's look at the 2.5 million one.
But honestly, Noah Brown superior playing the flex than the extra tight end. Yeah, so this is the other thing that's happened is that DraftKings has been much better at pricing. They've been fluctuating based on performance and ownership, whereas sometimes it used to be one and or the other. You'd see somebody massively owned one week, and then they would just inflate the price artificially. They wouldn't necessarily react to the box score, but it seems as though they've done a pretty good job of pricing. There haven't been any major gripes or complaints. I think we've gravitated towards some plays. Whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, there are definitely some plays that have been interesting. But I think the tight end position, because of there's just a different floor on running backs. We all know that from 2 years ago, the 4K number that exists for backup running backs. So like it's rare you're going to run into a sub 5K guy that is just massive chalk. Singletary 2 weeks ago would have been the guy. This week you wanted Singletary, ironically enough, but I think the tight end, the double tight end, give you so much access to these top stacks that are now appropriately priced. And it's hard to get to Dak and CeeDee Lamb or to, on a week like this, you're going to have, I guess it's an evening game, but like, Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, it's so hard to get to these guys without salary savings. And so if you can get the tight ends that find the box or get 10 targets, 12 targets, you're so much better off going that direction than you've been in years past.
That's a really good point. Like a lot of people are still hesitant. We get the question all the time. Is it okay to play double tight end on this slate? Yeah. And my answer has always been yes, but like maybe it wasn't previously. At least now we can see both of these Millie Maker winning lineups have double tight end in it. We've seen it several times this year. What's interesting about this one, or one of the many things that's interesting about Short Gamer's lineup, he actually has a different stack. He has John Ferguson in there in the Dallas stack instead of like, he doesn't have the nuts with Brandon Cooks in here. John Ferguson also did score a touchdown, so obviously helped as well. But he has Dak Prescott with CeeDee Lamb, John Ferguson, Rachaad White once again in this one, even with that just 17.8 fantasy points. He has Devin Singletary in this one, 30 carries last week for Devin Singletary. That was fun to see. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a great game. This one does have Noah Brown in it, who was surprisingly not in the main Millie Maker winning lineup, but he made it into this high stakes Millie Maker winning lineup. Of course, has TJ Hawkinson once again and has the Texans defense here. So actually got a few more points out of his defense. Did I say 240 something fantasy points, something like that?
242. Yep.
242
basically
in a smaller field contest. That's really impressive. Our guy Short Gamer TV, man, he's had some smashes throughout. I don't think he's won a Millie Maker prior to this, using these stochastic sims to win this Millie Maker. Really awesome to see. And that's actually the second person, because Dalton Dry 3 weeks ago, whatever, won a Millie Maker, said that he used the stochastic sims in making his lineup as well. So we were just seeing, we also had somebody take down the 20 max $3 contest for $100,000 this past weekend. The sims are absolutely crushing it. And Eric, I don't know if you heard, we've got a deal going on as a result. Because we have won the Millie Maker, we now have a 20% off deal on whatever sims package you want. And that's actually NFL, NBA, whatever you want to use for that package, kind of celebrating our wins recently in these contests, and in particular, obviously the Millie Maker win for Short Gamer TV. Really cool to see. So we're celebrating. We're making any Sims package. Oh, it's $20 off to new customers. The deal is going to end on Monday, so I would take advantage of it now while you can. Our data packages, it is 20%. Okay, it's my read says $20. I was sort of because I thought it was 20% off. That is good to hear. So that's more money than $20. So take advantage of it. 20% off the Sims tool. You can build up to 10,000 lineups in 60 seconds with our contest generator. You can build with the base package up to 500 lineups if you choose that one. But if you want to choose the max package, you can build up to 10,000 lineups. So depending on, the field size you're playing in, choose whatever you want, but fantastic deal. This is such a powerful tool. And if you haven't tried it out, 20% off. Now is the time to do so. The link will be in the description of this video if you're not watching live. If you are watching live, Jordan Klein has put it into YouTube chat. So check it out if you haven't already done so. Our Sims tool has just been smashing. Take advantage of it. All right. Should we get into this week's slate? Eric, are you ready to talk about some running backs for this week's slate?
Let's frickin' party.
Let's party. All right. So we talked about James Conner, somebody that you loved in best ball. Well, he is our highest owned running back on the slate. 5,700. We've got him at 18% ownership. Let's just talk about the chalk to start. So we've got 4 players projected for over 15% ownership. Those being James Conner, Jahmyr Gibbs, Josh Jacobs, Breece Hall. Of these 4, is there one that you like the best? Is there anybody that you're fading? How are you kind of feeling about these 4 chalkier running backs?
Yeah, James Conner, 5,700 for his role, for his opportunity. 16 carries, nothing in the passing game. I think that's one of the things with Kyler Murray that I'm very curious to be paying attention to in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And we don't have a ton of time to be able to try to accumulate sample size for him and how he's going to be utilized. But like, if he's not going to be throwing checkdowns to James Conner, that adds another level of like, we really need that touchdown variance going towards James Conner. But he's 5,700. He's sub 20%. There's really nothing that I'm looking at there that's all that unappealing to me. Now, Detroit, this is going to be a headache. I think this is going to be a headache the rest of the way, is the difference between the utilization of a Jahmyr Gibbs and a David Montgomery when healthy. Did you see the clip of Jahmyr Gibbs where he said that David Montgomery was supposed to come in for the goal line touch? And then David said, no, kid, you go get it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Pretty cool of David Montgomery. And funny that they're interchange, like they can make that decision. It's not the coach's decision who gets to be used at the goal line, but good for David Montgomery. Good for Jahmyr Gibbs for capitalizing.
I mean, what do you want to do here is the question. Is like, if we're going to have Jahmyr Gibbs up there at 17%, I think I just got to have interest in David Montgomery at, a cheaper price point, pulling 0.6% ownership, because this could easily flip in either direction every single week. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs, the younger, quote, more explosive back, but David Montgomery, I mean, it was his first week coming off an injury. Don't we see this thing just level out around 50-50 more than likely?
Probably. That seems to be the direction it's headed. It's going to be a split backfield. Do you think they're going to continue to be like a good backfield despite being a split? Like, are these going to be fantasy relevant players going forward?
That's a really good question. I mean, that's obviously very, very important to try to figure out what we're going to do. I mean, the price dictates like what we're doing for a lot of things. They both worked out for you at ridiculous price points and no ownership. I didn't even play them in the afternoon slate against the Chargers, which is probably a mistake. It's definitely a mistake in hindsight based on the results, but I had no idea how to go about projecting the two of them. I know that Campbell wants to just establish the run and do all of those things. And Jared Goff, you don't want him throwing the ball 45 times a game. You're probably losing if he's throwing 45 times a game. There's just no way around it. So I think this is a spot where you have to have interest in the backfield, but God, 17% Jahmyr Gibbs, it's not out of control against the Bears. And the Bears, we know that they added one piece here in Sweat that is going to be okay from stopping the run, but like not really as a whole. It's a 48 total, 7.5 point favorites at home in the Dome. I mean, I'm just going to have some kind of interest in this backfield. And right now it would lie in 6,500 David Montgomery, just purely based on an ownership and leverage play.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a great leverage spot for David Montgomery. What do we have the ownership there at on Montgomery? Let me pull that up because I'm curious to see how low owned he is relative to. Yeah, do we have Montgomery at under 1%? I can't imagine he's going to actually end up
here's
under 1%.
The split breakdown for everybody, just to kind of recap what I'm looking at rather than just talking in circles. Jahmyr Gibbs, week 10, 58% of the snaps, 45% of the rushing opportunities. David Montgomery, 38% of the snaps, 39% of the rushing opportunities. We're talking about a difference of 6%. David Montgomery was supposed to come in for a goal line touch that could have flipped this 6 points one direction on both sides of it and bet a 12-point differential. And I doubt people would be looking at their box scores the same way. That just makes me all the more interested in trying to make some kind of a leverage play where it is so close to 50-50 already. And it was David Montgomery's first week back in a while. So like slowly acclimating him back to being some type of a bell cow. Doubt he's going to be a bell cow with how good Jahmyr Gibbs has been. I bet Jahmyr Gibbs ends up being out there in passing down situations a lot more. But again, this is a game where they're more than a touchdown favorite against Justin Fields and company. Maybe the fact that Justin Fields is out there, maybe this game can push a little bit more in pace. He had started playing better before getting injured. We saw the Washington game where he just absolutely smashed with DJ Moore. But I think for me, I just look at the ownership disparity between the two. I got to imagine a lot of GPP players like me, like yourself, they're going to be thinking the exact same thing I am, where it's like, give me the guy who's $500 cheaper that played for 1 week and then just hope that it breaks more 50-50.
Yeah, I can't imagine he's actually going to come in under 1% owned. I've been surprised before. I've said that before and been completely wrong. And guys like that have come in super low owned, but that's something I would imagine by Sunday, the ownership comes up at least somewhat on David Montgomery. But
yeah,
if it doesn't come up like pretty significantly, yeah, that's going to be a great spot at sub 1% ownership. And nice spot against, I mean, the Bears, they are sixth in terms of run
revenge spot for David Montgomery. Although, can you have revenge on going to a better football team?
Yeah,
like
right.
I wouldn't have much revenge for that.
I think EMAC calls that a remember me spot, I guess. So maybe it's remember me spot for David
That's
Montgomery.
really sharp. That's look at EMAC. In 150 years, that might be the funniest thing he's ever come up with.
That's true. Yeah, that was a sharp observation by EMAC. Yeah, Bears 29th in pass DVOA, 6th in run DVOA. The Lions offense is so good though that I'm not that concerned about it being a little bit of a pass funnel, at least in terms of DVOA. So yeah, David Montgomery looks like a good leverage play off of Jahmyr Gibbs. Obviously you can play Gibbs if you like that as well. I need to respond. Somebody in chat said, isn't it Jake Ferguson? You are correct. It is Jake Ferguson. Who is John Ferguson? The name is,
I don't know.
I know the name from somewhere, but yes, it is Jake Ferguson.
Somebody said Turd Ferguson, and that made me laugh a little bit.
Yeah, so. Turd. I think that was our guy. Stochastic said Turd Ferguson. But yes, it is Jake Ferguson on the Cowboys. James Conner, I know. So you kind of went over, 0 targets in the last game. Historically, He's been a pretty good pass catching back. Do you have any, do you have a read on that situation? Do you think that that's sticky? I have to think it's not, just based on his history as a pass catcher, but what do you think there?
I mean, it's a little bit worrisome purely because it was like come from behind mode. They ended up winning by 2. Thank God. I definitely needed that to salvage my Sunday from a betting perspective. But I look at a guy like James Conner and you see 16 carries, he's sub 6K. And I do think Arizona is going to be pretty decent offensively. We're going to get the games. These games are just going to push pace constantly whenever you have Houston on display. And, we look at the top stacks tool for this week. Second is the Houston Texans. It's a beautiful time to be alive if you're a Texans fan, all 4 of you. 11.3% top stack percentage. It is half of that of Miami being the top stack. But I got to think that as a run back option, James Conner is pretty interesting purely because if this game goes for, 55, 60 points, James Conner finding the end zone is a pretty likely opportunity situation. Like, he is going to be getting bell cow work most of the time when it comes to the rushing game. So if you get to the goal line, I don't think DeMercado, even if active this week, is going to take that over. There's no way Keontae Ingram is going to take that from James Conner. So I do think for a PPR site like DraftKings, like, if this ownership starts pushing 25% for whatever reason, I would at least have my qualms about that because I do think this is pretty touchdown dependent. And also their utilization of Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray is going to be somebody who usually does stuff with his legs in scramble situations, isn't going to be a check down guy. I kind of was hoping it was going to be a check down situation right from the get-go. Played a lot of James Conner last week. Was a little bit disappointed there, and they pulled him out at a goal line spot, ended up having Cooper Toon come in and stealing
That's
that
right.
from James Conner. That was a little frustrating, but I do think they're going to still be somewhat careful about with a guy like Kyler Murray around the goal line for the time being. And that just creates opportunity, I think, for a James Conner in other situations where they're not like inside of the one for a QB sneak. I think he's going to be getting the goal line carries. So at least that's there. Hopefully we see some more checkdowns this week, but it's hard to know.
Yeah, he did run routes on 42% of dropbacks last week. So it's not like he's not out there running routes. I think it's just a fluke that he didn't have any targets last week. As you said, he still got 16 carries, 61.5% of the carries for the Cardinals last week. He played 65% of snaps, and that was his first game back from injury. As you said, we're kind of hoping that he plays a little bit more this week as well, or if we're playing him, we are, but he is a little bit highly owned. So who knows if we'll see where the ownership comes in on Sunday, decide how much James Conner we really want to get to Breece Hall, Josh Jacobs. I got to say, before I saw our ownership, Josh Jacobs to me was by far, or not by far, but he was a play that I was really interested in, despite the Raiders only having a 16.5 implied team total. The Dolphins, not a great offense, 26 in terms of run DVOA. And I have to imagine they're going to be using Josh Jacobs a bit more with AOC under center. But does not look great in the tools just from a leverage standpoint. Just looks a little bit over-owned. Do you have a preference between, I mean, similar with Breece Hall and Josh Jacobs, both just look like they're getting too much ownership relative to their odds of success. Do you have a preference between those two?
Yeah, this is a really tough one. I think this is going to be a big decision point for a lot of people. Is like, I think it's pretty easy to see why James Conner's popular. You're in a high total game. Everybody wants to stack up Houston. Makes sense as a run back. Also makes sense as an individual play because $5,700 does a lot for you. Unless you feel comfortable with Hubbard against a Dallas defense, it's going to be hard to find some of these cheapies that you really want to click on, like it's been on other weeks where we've had some devalued pieces. I think Josh Jacobs is in a great spot against Miami. Obviously, people are going to want to play Miami, but I mean, I'm a little bit concerned about two things with both of these guys, with Jacobs and Hall. One, you're looking at a 17 or a 16.5 point total, respective team totals for both of them. And two, I think the Raiders have made a very concerted effort to get Davante Adams the football in the aftermath of getting rid of McDaniels. Like, the Raiders have played themselves into playoff contention. It is extremely important with the things that they've given up that they retain Davante Adams somehow, some way here. You need to make him happy. I think that's the difference between what we saw were 11 targets or whatever it was that Josh Jacobs had against the Bears in that disgusting football game. And Josh Jacobs just absolutely nuked. I guess it was against the Chargers. Sorry, it was against the Chargers that he had that ridiculous amount of volume that he had with Aiden O'Connell as his quarterback. But like, I don't know. This feels like a spot Davante Adams is going to be funneled there. That's such a hard run back for this football game if you're going to some of these expensive Miami pieces. And then with Breece Hall, it's just the concern you have about the Jets offense that's been incompetent. I mean, it has been purely incompetent the last couple of weeks. It seems as though after Zach Wilson started improving, defenses started scheming pretty appropriately for him, forced Breece Hall into really bad situations, not really giving him the space to work. Because there had been some fluky plays Breece Hall had, whether it was that massive, ridiculous touchdown that he had against Denver, a couple of them against the Giants there. He ended up having that the receiving touchdown there for a long play. As long as defenses take that away, they have had nothing. And Garrett Wilson can't really get targeted by a quarterback that's as bad as Zach Wilson is repeatedly here and find success. So I just have concerns about the Jets offense like most people are. So I think right now I'm actually lower on both pieces if the slate were to start today at their current ownerships based on what I'm doing in the Sims, but that's just me.
Yeah, and that's right in line with what the Sims are saying. Was not my initial instinct, but I also didn't really think Josh Jacobs was going to be chalky, and he is coming in a little bit chalkier than I had hoped. So if I were to play one of Breece Hall or Josh Jacobs, it is still Josh Jacobs for me, just because love the matchup with Miami, and you can at least hope for a big workload here. But as you said, Davante Adams has they've been targeting with 34.6% target rate over the past two games. So
as they should, though, like, you've given up so much to get him, and he's such an alpha receiver. We all know it. So you want to get him involved and make him as happy as possible, because again, if you lose him in this situation, you're setting your franchise back. But I think Tom Baum kind of describes what I'm looking at perfectly here. He says Breece Hall underpriced, but there are better plays. I feel that way about Josh Jacobs too. I think this is underpriced at 6,800 going up against Miami. But I like getting up to McCaffrey again on the expensive end. This is going to be one of those, like, Tampa Bay's been number one at preventing running backs from fantasy points. They've been number one against running backs, but this is Christian McCaffrey, and this is an opportunity to get him at 13%, 14%. I'm always going to take that. And then there's guys that are just way cheaper. I think Devin Singletary again this week is a great option at 5,300. I'd be surprised if he doesn't get steamed up. I think working down the board, we'll get to some of our tournament plays, but like, doesn't a Rashad White, even against San Francisco at 6K, warrant discussion for being a better play because of that reception volume as opposed to a Jacobs and a Hall? For me, it's just the team totals aren't very good on either one of those. So like, I don't have a huge touchdown expectation for either, but like, God, it's a wonky spot for running backs this week.
Yeah, it really is. And just to tie a bow on some points you made, Josh Jacobs. So as Davante Adams has been targeted more, Josh Jacobs just 2 targets over the past 2 weeks. So who knows if that's going to hold? But yeah, definitely a little bit disconcerting if you do have interest in Josh Jacobs there. Breece Hall in not the best spot in the world against the Bills run defense. So yeah, we can certainly look for like the chalk this week is not smash kind of chalk. It's not like very obvious. These are guys that you need to play kind of chalk. So we can play some more of these kind of off the wall, little bit lower owned plays. I also wanted to note, Sean V, good point that the Cardinals did sign Michael Carter.
Saw that.
I don't unclear if he's going to be active this week. I have no idea what to expect if he's going to be active, but that could potentially hurt James Conner a little bit.
I mean, that was a pretty surprising deal that the Jets did there.
I couldn't believe that.
Obviously, he must have been some kind of a locker room issue or something, because Michael Carter has utility. You could have him as a punt returner, but primarily just a passing game role to give Breece Hall some time off the field. I mean, Michael Carter's a very serviceable back. He was a part of the timeshare at North Carolina with Javonte Williams, and Michael Carter was the receiving back for them. So a little bit surprising to me. And yeah, that might be a problem, but I doubt they just give him 30%? Like, what would it take for Michael Carter to be concerning to you on the field? I don't think there's any opportunity whatsoever, barring injury, that he plays like 20% of snaps
this week. Yeah, it seems unlikely that he's going to come in and play that many snaps. So not a huge concern for James Conner. Looking at our top optimal odds running backs, and you already named one of them, Devin Singletary. We have him optimal 28% of the time. He's only 5,300. We just saw Singletary get 30 carries last week, which honestly to me was pretty surprising, seeing him get 30 of the team's 34 rushing attempts. Also ran routes on 54% of plays. Is Devin Singletary a priority for you?
Yeah, I think he is. I think he has to be. In the absence of Dameon Pierce, this has just been an all-out smash every single time. I jammed him 2 weeks ago. I jammed him last week. It's such cheap opportunity to get exposure to an offense that I just kind of believe in now. It's so weird. I could not have possibly been more wrong about CJ Stroud in a million years, but this is the beautiful thing, is that you're allowed to change your take based on what you're seeing, and you're seeing a quarterback really come into his own. You're not going to see a ton of check down opportunity here, but there is no doubt that Devin Singletary is the better back between him and Dameon Pierce. He adds the passing dimension if you ever want it. You've only seen 2 targets has been kind of the top of the range for a Devin Singletary. That's obviously concerning on PPR, but it's 5,300 to a game environment that you want to be a part of. 26 total here for Houston. So everything I talked about with Jacobs there at 6,800, you're looking at nearly a 10-point better team total, and you're saving $1,500 going to him. And I kind of expect both of them to be primarily rushers of the football. So I think Devin Singletary is just another smash play this week against Arizona.
Certainly looks like it in the tools. Yeah, looks like a play that we're going to kind of need to play some of. I would not feel good if I'm fading Devin Singletary. What do you think of Travis Etienne this week? Because it's obviously a tough spot with a pass funnel Titans run defense, but Etienne gets so much workload recently. He's on the season, Etienne 79% snap share, has taken 63% of the Jaguars carries, 160 carries in 9 games. He's run routes on 53% of dropbacks, 34 targets in 9 games. The usage is just so elite for Travis Etienne that even in tough matchups, it's hard to fade him. He looks good here, but it is a really tough matchup. What do you think you're going to do with Travis Etienne?
Yeah, I'm not trying to look too much into, last week was a complete dud, coming off of a bye, everything going for you. And then you just lay an egg against San Francisco, just an absolute beatdown. Part of it is Deebo Samuel coming back for San Francisco. He's such an important part of that football team. And the other part of it is just this offense not being ready to play. Travis Etienne, I'm not going to look anything coming off of the bye. I don't think it matters that he only had 63% of the snaps. That game was well out of range. They let Dearness Johnson come in there towards the very, very end of that, 20% of snaps for him. He hadn't played more than 5% of snaps in a game since week 3. Tank Bigsby, we know what we're going to get from him. We're going to get around 10%, 15% of snaps pretty much every single week, come in mid-yardage, second quarter type situations. But Travis Etienne, I think he's a great play. It's just a question of 7,200. Are we looking at him as just being touchdown dependent once again? Because he had been going completely berserk in that department for a couple of weeks. And I think that's really what elevated his price tag to 7,200, because you look at his rushing volume, he had only gone over 100 yards once this entire season. He hasn't gone over 70 yards receiving this season, which is a large number, obviously, but it only been over 50 yards once as well. That 70-yard game against Pittsburgh, it had been 2 touchdowns against New Orleans, 2 touchdowns against Indy, 2 touchdowns against Buffalo. And so I feel like you're maybe buying him at a high point in a tough matchup for what he does. Like, he can get some kind of passing game volume here and be all right, but I think this is just a disgusting football game. I have a little bit of Will Levis interest that we can talk about it during the stacks portion of the program, just because I think Okonkwo is going to be somebody that has to, garner a little bit more attention going forward. And there's reasons for that. But I think we have to be looking at Travis Etienne as somebody who's just due for touchdown regression. And at 7,200, I think there might just be better options in that mid-range. And that's why the chalk is kind of going that way.
Yeah, I mean, we've got positive leverage on him as of now, but that's something I'll track, because if I can find an excuse to not play much Travis Etienne, I'm going to take it. He is I will say 7th of all running backs in terms of expected fantasy points so far on the season. So the volume is so good that it's a tough fade. But as you noted last week, it was a blowout, so maybe that was the reason. But he had a little bit less volume than maybe we're accustomed to. We should continue to move on, because we're almost 50 minutes into the show already. But a couple more thoughts. I just want to Jaylen Warren announced as a starter for Pittsburgh. Jaylen Warren's 5,100. We have him at 8% ownership. Do you think it matters that he was announced as a starter? Like, is it going to be a 55-45 split, or do you think they're like going to give him 70% of carries going forward?
No, I think this is more a little bit of lip service. I bet. I mean, they both scored. I mean, Najee and Jaylen Warren both kind of worked out. They played 50 and 52% of snaps. So I don't know when they shared the field for a hot second there, but I mean, 47% of the rushing attempts for Najee, 44% for Jaylen Warren. They have not. Like, Najee Harris has played between 50 and 60% of the snaps every game. Jaylen Warren's played between 40 and 50% of snaps every single game. I would be shocked if we saw somebody all of a sudden get emerged to 65 or 70. I had a pretty big level of interest in Najee Harris last week, ended up playing a ton of him. I talked about him on this show, talked about him on Sunday Live before lock. He was too cheap. Now we're looking at a spot where, there's maybe another layer where he could end up being the guy who sees the 40% of snaps, but like, it doesn't take away that this is a very tough spot to have interest in a running back period against Cleveland. So like, for me, it's not even close to the priority that it was last week against Green Bay.
Yeah. Okay. And then the only other spot that I feel like we have to talk about the Dolphins running backs, just because they have absolutely annihilated so many slates. Now they're facing a Raiders defense that's 27th in terms of pass DVOA. They have Devin Etienne returning. This is going to be the first game all season that at least we're expecting to have all of Mostert, Etienne, Jeff Wilson all healthy. Do you have any kind of read on, like, is there one of these guys that you really like or going to be mixing your exposures? How are you feeling about this Dolphins running back situation this week?
Like shit.
Yeah.
It's a spot you want to have some type of interest and exposure. And how many Tua plus running back plus wide receiver stacks have worked out this year when healthy? The answer is a lot of them. I just don't know how, and this is the same thing. It goes back to the Devon Etienne thing before when he was mega chalk. And it's just like, I understood that he could be a generational talent. He could be outrageous based on what we saw at Texas A&M. He is a very special young individual, the fastest individual in the NFL by most metrics. So like, you look at the next gen speed on him and everything, he's just outrageous. But how do you project out the touches here without, you had McDaniel basically being a little bit coy with it too, being like, oh, you got money on your fantasy. How much money you have in fantasy football, with the whole press conference talking about how much Etienne could be utilized here. I don't know. Do you know? I don't know. I'm going to have to just watch news and try to guess. Otherwise, I'm just going to have Raheem Mostert play 60% of snaps. I'll have Etienne play 30% of snaps, and I'll have Wilson play 10. I'm not going to play Etienne, and everybody can enjoy rostering him and watching him bust off an 80-yard touchdown. I don't know what else to do with the backfield unless I get news.
I think all we can really say is keep your eye on the news, keep your ears to the ground, because it's really hard to know at this point how it's going to break down. It is important though, because they are such a good offense, because it is such a great spot. It's like, I'm probably going to play both.
Highest team total of the week.
Yeah.
Highest team. Highest team total of the week. 29. Like, fuck.
It's such a great spot. It's such a great spot that you really can't avoid it. But at the same time, it's hard to read at this point. So I'm going to try to get as much information as I can. If I don't get much information going forward, I'm going to take shots on both of Mostert and Etienne, I think, even without knowing. And it could really bite me because they might not play much, but it was at least worth talking about. Eric, should we move on, turn the page to wide receivers? Do you have any other running backs that you feel you need to shout out?
Yeah, I did this last week when I was like, hey, we have to at least talk about Najee, and that ended up actually working out to a certain extent. 18.6 against Green Bay, 16 carries, saw 4 targets, 3 catches. Everything was really, really good with that. I want to at least throw out Darrell Henderson this week. This is that 5K guy going up against Seattle here. I don't know what to make of what we're going to get for this Rams backfield going forward, but it feels like kind of Matthew Stafford, he's going to be playing football this week. And that's a huge deal to the complexion of this offense. And now you're looking at a 5K Darrell Henderson who had been playing a majority of the snaps. I don't think Royce Freeman sees any massive amount of volume here, unless you do. I mean, he saw 12 carries. Part of that was just a terrible game script against Green Bay. They were set up for nothing. But you get a healthy Matt Stafford back there and this offense being more competent. I have to have some interest there in Darrell Henderson at like 5%. I think he sees the majority of snaps. I think he's definitely the guy that's on the field in passing situations. I think Matthew Stafford makes this offense exponentially better than what we saw. It shouldn't be a hot take. I mean, they ended up getting rid of Rippey and Raid after that football game, but like, this is a very different Rams outlook. I have tons of interest in them as a stack. I have tons of interest in everything there. So I have to have Darrell Henderson interest.
Yeah, I was just looking up because I was foggy on whether Kyren Williams is returning this week, and it looks like he's probably not expected until week 12. So yeah, that's a really good call because it is a spot where we've seen running back smash, we've seen Kyren Williams smash for the Rams. I think Kyren Williams probably a little bit better than Darrell Henderson, but not enough to like if he gets the opportunities, it could.
And I don't think Darrell Henderson's going to play any kind of that role. He's not going to have the Kyren Williams ceiling of 35-40. I would be surprised by that, but I think he sees a majority of the snaps on a team that went from completely dysfunctional to more than functional, like very fantasy viable, just by getting Matt Stafford back this week.
Yep, absolutely. That's a good shout out. And I just saw somebody in chat saying no love for Austin Ekeler against Green Bay. Yeah, Austin Ekeler looks totally fine. It's obviously a good spot. He's 8,600. It's actually with Keenan Allen out, that could end up being a priority spot if Keenan Allen is out. He's currently questionable. If Keenan Allen misses, Austin Ekeler will become a priority. As of right now, he looks pretty good. We've got him at 8%.
I would play Neil Orfield against the Green Bay defense running into the back of that off. Green Bay couldn't stop Neil Orfield running football right now.
I mean, that's only true until they touch me. As soon as they touch me, I'm going down. But like, if the offensive line is good enough, I can follow that offensive.
You got that buoy though. You got that.
I do.
Beer.
I got heft. I got heft at the very least. I got.
You're like the marshmallow guy from Ghostbusters too.
Yeah, but yeah, that's a good shout out with Ekeler. I appreciate that. All right, we're gonna move on and talk about some wide receivers. We'll talk about tight ends, our top stacks to close out the show. I do want to remind you guys though, Prize Picks is the sponsor of this show. You can get a free month of Odd Shopper Premium when you sign up using our link for Prize Picks. You got the link in the description of this video if you're not watching live. If you are watching live, it's going to be in YouTube chat as well. But you're going to get your free month of Odd Shopper Premium. Fantastic tool. I know Eric uses it a lot because you do a lot of betting content. Odd Shopper Premium just gives you the best bets. It uses a market-based approach, compares books against each other, knows the sharp books versus the softer books to find the best lines for you across those books on Odd Shopper. So when you sign up at Prize Picks, you're going to get your free month of Odd Shopper Premium and up to $100 deposit match bonus. Free money on Prize Picks. You put $100 in, they're going to match that $100. You'll have $200 in your account immediately that you can then use to bet on, to make some cards, take the over, the under on different stats for different players. Really fun place to play if you haven't already checked out Prize Picks. And now would be a great time to sign up just because we do have the free month of Odd Shopper Premium along with that deposit match bonus. All right. You ready to talk about some wide receivers, Eric?
Yeah, this is the week right here. This is the week.
This is the week. So we've got I don't know what you mean by that, but we'll find out. We've got five wide receivers projected for 15% or more ownership. Tank Dell is leading the ownership right now, 20.3%. We've got Tyreek Hill at 19%, Cooper Kupp 16%, Christian Kirk 16%, Garrett Wilson 16%. Anybody you love, anybody you hate from the chalk wide receivers?
It's hard not to like the Houston-Arizona side. I mean, Arizona is going to be crazy chalk. We're going to have a lot of Arizona interest. And last week, I said it, I wanted to be early to the party on Kyler Murray. I wanted to roster a ton of him. He was sub 5% in just about everything. I was way over the field. Didn't look all that good. Obviously, I got the rushing touchdown to kind of buoy that performance, but there is such a ceiling there. I think him, James Conner, and then the rest of this crew, you can play all of those wide receivers. It completely makes sense that Tank Dell, I thought he was like dead after that hit to the ribs last week. That was such a ridiculous shot that he took. Comes back out, 14 targets, only 6 catches. So there's more of a ceiling for him too. CJ Stroud is really freaking good, and I was very wrong. I will have to say that for the rest of my life.
How many times are you going to say that on shows?
I have to.
I was so wrong on CJ Stroud.
I have to shame myself constantly that I don't know jack diddly squat about ball anymore. So Tank Dell, he is good chalk at 5,900. It's going to be one of those questions, though, is like, hey, the portfolio, how do we look at it? The week is the Rams. I am playing so much Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua pending, he was limited in practice Wednesday. Tutu Atwell, I'll have interest to as well. But like, we are now running into a spot where the Rams are so much cheaper than what they were. We were paying $9,500 for Cooper Kupp and $8,500 for Nacua in some of these spots when Matt Stafford was healthy. We got him for this week, $8,100 and $7,100 against Seattle. I have so many Rams in my lineups in early builds. It is not even funny. And I love looking at the top stacks tool, just trying to make sure that I wasn't just having this ridiculous amount of interest for no reason. The Rams, 7% top stack percentage. That's 5th on the board. It's behind Miami, Houston, Detroit, and Dallas. I expect all 4 to continue to gain ownership. But right now, we have Matt Stafford at 1.8% ownership, like no ownership whatsoever. And that stack, other than Houston, which is super cheap to put together still, the Rams are sitting there 6,492 for an average salary per skill position player. And that, my friends, is a jam spot for me against Seattle's secondary.
That's a really good point. I've talked about it in past weeks, doing the double stack there with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Hasn't really worked out just yet, but I said that a couple weeks ago with the CJ Stroud stacks. The double stack had not quite worked out, and then it completely went off. I love that call on the Rams. That is a good shout out, because at some point, like the volume is so good for both of those this year, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp.
Well, you're getting the price decrease because they had one of the worst quarterbacks I've ever seen play the game of football on their football team trying to throw a football. And now you're coming off the bye. You just jammed this. This is like the EMAC remember me spot. This is Matt Stafford we're talking about here. This guy is pretty freaking good at football. And, a wide receiver cannot be functional without a good quarterback to some extent, or at least a quarterback who can get the ball to them in some capacity. Brett Rypien couldn't do that to save his life. 7 targets, 2 catches here. So now we get a major price decrease on both of them. And Tutu Atwell, 3,900. I think a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. I mean, you have, 12 personnel. That's not even a thing for the Rams, basically played at like the lowest clip in the NFL. So like, this is so easy for me to see Tyler Higbee being the only tight end on the field, 11 personnel. Like, I really like Tutu Atwell as a contrarian sub 4K piece.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting piece as well. I hadn't even thought about Tutu Atwell, but you're right. He's out there enough, should have some opportunities. So if you're playing, the Stafford stacks, make some sense to go to Tutu as well. I guess one thing I will say about Tank Dell, we do have Nico Collins. He at least says he's going to play this week. It is not official at this point, but we'll have to keep an eye on that, because that would obviously, I'd want to keep my eye on the ownership of Tank Dell versus Nico Collins, because if there is a big disparity, I'd probably just go to Nico Collins instead. But that's something we'll have to keep an eye on as we.
I mean, Noah Brown's going to be popular 4,800 too. We have him at like 4%. Yeah. There's no way he's going to be just 4%.
Yeah, that's probably true. It's gonna. We really need to find out if Nico Collins is definitely playing, because that will affect things. But yeah, as of right now, I mean, Noah Brown, it seems to have carved out a role for himself. Like, it'd be hard for them to completely go away from him after the recent stretch he's had. Well, I would guess he just replaces Robert Woods at that point.
That's what I was thinking. I would want to at least throw it out there. They're like, Robert Woods, confirmed not as good as Noah Brown. Like that's like a confirmed fact. They're not even remotely comparable here at this point in time. I mean, it is so easy for me to look at pretty much everything in this Houston Arizona game as good chalk. It's hard for me not to. They're too cheap still. Too cheap.
Yeah, that's a very interesting game stack, and really not really that high owned. I mean, we do have Tank Dell getting significant ownership.
Just wait,
as of
it's
right
coming.
Now.
It's coming.
I guess we do have James Conner. I say they're not that high owned, and then it's like, oh, James Conner is our highest owned running back. Tank Dell is our highest owned receiver. So I guess they are getting some ownership, but there are at least some parts of the game that, it's probably coming. You're right, but maybe we'll be able to find some contrarian pieces within it that we can think about. Similar to Dallas last week. Like there were parts of Dallas that were pretty chalky, but then there were parts that went completely off, like Brandon Cooks, that were not chalky. So maybe hopefully we can find the same thing in this game. Any other wide receivers, pivots that you want to talk about? Any wide receivers that you really need to talk about on this later? Or we can also talk about them as we talk about top stacks later.
I mean, do we just all beat our heads against a wall trying to figure out Calvin Ridley and why Calvin Ridley sucks and why Jacksonville sucked last week? Because you talked about it before. Tennessee, absolute pass funnel. Like Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley, 5,400 and 6K respectively. I mean, this is, if I'm building out 5 lineups, it's really hard for me not to look at one of them, like for like the $33 5 max that I love so much. Like, it's hard for me not to look at Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley and just putting them together with Trevor Lawrence and playing whatever I want around them. Those are 2 really cheap pieces against a team that is second worst holding wide receiver. It's such a weird phrasing. It's like second in wide receiver points given up. There you go. There it is. Found it. But Jacksonville is definitely going to be a spot to have some interest. I'm going to like Evan Ingram at the tight end position when we talk about that too. He's 4,300. That's just very, very cheap. Him and Trey McBride are underpriced for what they are and for what their roles are. So Evan Ingram, we're going to see some touchdown variance in his life more than likely sooner rather than later. Like the fact that he hasn't necessarily gotten there, probably keeps his ownership somewhat in check.
Looking at Calvin Ridley, because you actually made me curious. I hadn't looked closely at the data for the year. On the season, Calvin Ridley, 126 expected fantasy points,
Jesus.
95 actual fantasy points. So he just has, and he's had some really close, like off the fingertips kind of touchdowns, like so close to scoring so much better than he has. So maybe there is a little bit of a fluke, because just looking at like route participation, target share, he is third on the team in target share, but like he's at 19.5%. Christian Kirk's at 21.8%
of his team's air yards.
Right. Like you'd think that it's going to come at some point for Calvin Ridley. All of these underlying metrics still look good, even as he has been a complete bust for fantasy players. On the flip side of Calvin Ridley, with his 126 expected, 95 actual fantasy points, Christian Kirk, 111 expected. So he actually has 15 fewer expected fantasy points, 128 actual fantasy points scored. So you'd think maybe there'll be some regression in Calvin Ridley's favor at some point, but as you said, you can play either of them. They're both pretty cheap this week. We'll talk about Evan Ingram as well in a minute, because we're going to get to tight ends. Any other talking points you want to touch on with wide receivers?
I mean, just CeeDee Lamb, 9,200. That's a big tag, and yet he's going to get a lot of ownership against Carolina. He's gone for, 40,000 fantasy points the last 4 weeks. So, I mean, the guy has been targeted at a ridiculous clip, 14, 16, 14 targets the last 3 weeks, no fewer than 32 fantasy points in any single one of those, actually getting involvement in the rushing department as well. That rushing TD they had last week, just stupid stuff that we're seeing from him. Tons of volume. If you end up getting some kind of these cheaper stacks into your lineups, I mean, getting to a 9,200 CeeDee Lamb, definitely not a bad thing. I will throw out there that I probably prefer Tyreek Hill. It looks like the field does as well right now. 9,300 for him. Another kind of like, remember me, coming off of these buys, people just don't necessarily factor it in nearly as much. And I guess it wasn't a buy. It was just that they played in Germany and they haven't played football for a while on a main slate, it feels like. So Tyreek Hill, 9,300 for him. Waddle, like those are going to be some pieces that you have interest in, considering they have the slate high total.
Yeah, Waddle coming in at under 6% ownership with an 8% chance to be an optimal. So that is a natural pivot option off of Tyreek Hill. But as you said, both look great in the tools, both definitely players that we can play here. Well, we don't have enough time to talk about every wide receiver that we probably want to, but Eric and I both have more shows coming up in the week that we can, if there's anybody that we haven't talked about. So we should turn it over and talk about some tight ends. And you've already alluded to some of your interest in Evan Ingram, for example. He is our second highest projected owned tight end at 18.5% ownership. Trey McBride coming in slightly higher owned, 19.4%. And then it is actually Dalton Schultz this time, not Jake Ferguson, coming in third at 14.7% with some nice leverage there on Dalton Schultz. Dalton Kincaid now seems to be has had a really great role recently for the Bills. Just talking about all of these, and then we've got Cole Kmet at 14%. So of those guys, Cole Kmet, Dalton Kincaid, Dalton Schultz, Ingram, McBride, who do you like? Any fades for you?
Yeah, I like McBride the most. I liked him the most last week. He ended up showing a ton in the Sims tool, a lot of two tight end builds. And that was kind of the thing that I was glad I didn't override about the Sims tool, because I overrode too much other crap, and I ended up screwing up the data. And yeah, you can get great data, but if you try to get a little bit too user happy, it gets to be a problem. But I mean, Trey McBride is just playing an elite type role here of late. I mean, we're 78% of route participation there, 28% of his team's targets last week, coming off of 40% there in week 8. 30% was this exact number that he had in week 10 there alongside Kyler Murray. Everybody wondering, hey, how is that going to affect him? It's only going to be a good thing. I love what Dobbs has done for our Minnesota Vikings. There's no doubt about it. But a lot of that tenure that they did have had Zach Ertz healthy and active for it. And then they made the switch over to was it Clayton Tune just for the one game in week 9 against Cleveland, just sacrificed him to the Wolves. That was very nice of them. But Kyler Murray in Houston, a game environment that you want to have exposure to. The guy's had 14 to 9 targets 2 of the last 3 weeks. I just write off that Cleveland Clayton Tune start. I mean, it makes all the sense in all the land to just keep clicking on Trey McBride.
Yep. And the field's going to be there, but it makes a lot when you're getting that kind of volume at 4,400, just makes too much sense to completely fade that spot.
Who's your favorite of the chalky guys pulling double digits? Because again, it's McBride, Ingram, Schultz, Kincaid, Cole Kmet. I think Kmet's probably my second favorite purely because of price and getting Justin Fields into the mix.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, he is 4,100. I mean, I think I'm going to go just with the tools because we have such positive leverage on Dalton Schultz. He is the most expensive of the group, so like, you can get a little bit of an advantage. But Dalton Schultz against that that Arizona defense, we have him at 15% ownership, 21% chance of being optimal. I think this is a spot. It's really hard for me to differentiate, but just looking at, I'm pulling up 16.6% target share for Dalton Schultz on the year. He's got 53 targets in 9 games. That's pretty solid for a tight end, running routes on 67% of dropbacks. Doesn't have quite the same, he doesn't have the same usage as McBride recently. So a little bit lagging there, but still good enough usage. Has CJ Stroud throwing him the ball in a great spot. So I think I'm just going to go with the tools here, just because we do have such nice leverage with Dalton Schultz. But I mean, you made a great point for McBride, made a great case for him. Evan Ingram, as you said, great spot there as well. It's tough. We actually have some nice tight end options this week. Do you think it's another week where a lot of your tight ends are just going to be correlated with your stacks, like with your quarterback or as the bring back?
Yes and no. I mean, I bet I have a lot of McBride independent of Kyler Murray. I think 4,400 in the role that he's played. I bet I have a lot of Evan Ingram independent of the quarterback here as well. Dalton Schultz,
Trevor
5K. Trevor Lawrence. Yeah, my brain just was shutting off there for a second, because the one guy I wanted to ask you about, because it's been a little bit better for him here of late. It hasn't been elite by any means, but what do you think about Chigoziem Okonkwo here in this spot? I think this is a Tennessee spot where we expect on the other side, we're going to see some offense coming. Obviously we made the passing game. We're talking about Jacksonville over and over again here, where maybe some of these pieces are too cheap. I think instead of playing Hopkins, that one game, everybody sees it with Will Levis and kind of is just pointing to that. He only ran 56% of routes. Week 9, he ran 82% route participation there for Okonkwo. Saw 14% of the targets last week. He had 24% of the targets, though, that first Will Levis starts. So, it's been a little bit better here than what it was with Ryan Tannehill back in the day. And I think we probably see him have a good game. He hasn't put up double-digit fantasy points in a game yet this season. But one thing that happens is that these guys who are 2,900, like a McBride once upon a time, are now 4,400. These players are now starting to get priced into what their production is. Now, tight end, you can generally get more production at a cheaper price point than what you can at wide receiver or running back. And that's why we're seeing more 2 tight end builds also starting to emerge to the top. But it's not so much I'm not going to be playing Will Levis all that much, but I think Okonkwo 3,200, other than Tyler Conklin, who might see some more ownership just because of box scores, he's caught all 13 of his targets the last 2 weeks. For Zach Wilson, been the one bright spot in a bleak world in that offense. I don't think there's anybody cheaper that I really want to be clicking on below Okonkwo. So that's the bottom end of the range. I'll have a little bit of Higbee, but I don't really know how else are you going to save money on this slate?
Yeah, it's a really interesting. He doesn't stand out to me as a top option because he's facing the Jaguars, pretty good defense. But I noted this last week. the Jaguars defensive coordinator actually came out and said they want to force teams to be one-dimensional, want to force teams to throw on them, which is different than the way most defenses play. Most defenses would rather have you running on them all day. The Jaguars are trying to force teams to throw on them. So maybe Chigoziem Okonkwo and Will Levis, that's a great, just a better spot with Will Levis. 10 targets over the past 2 games for Okonkwo, 3,200. Yeah, I think that's pretty sharp. I think Okonkwo, somebody that I definitely will have some interest in. I'm curious, like Pat Freiermuth at 2,500. The price tag stands out to me as Pat Freiermuth returns. Only has 13 targets in 4 games.
How much do we expect him to play, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, that is part of the question. And just like he honestly has not been as good this year as I think of Pat Freiermuth as being kind of that, like, second, third tier of tight end where he's still
Kenny Pickett sucks.
Kenny Pickett does, but he, at least last year, he liked Pat Freiermuth a lot. So it was, that kind of offset how much he sucked, but just 9.8% target share this year. I guess the $2,500 price tag, it feels low relative to like where we were drafting him all summer, but at the same time, he hasn't done anything this year to say that it should be higher. So I don't know, maybe I'll take a shot here or there, but hard to prioritize.
I will be paying very close attention to his ownership, because if he ends up really chalky, I am playing cash this week. Like, I will take Trey McBride, and everybody else can save the $1,900 and play, $2,500 Pat Freiermuth with nowhere near the expected target volume. And I will try to play cash. You can guarantee he will not be in my head-to-heads. That is for sure. So if you want to scoop and you think that he's a phenomenal play, everybody go ahead and Elindy4, come find me.
Yeah, we've got him at 11% ownership, so it's definitely possible that he will be chalky in cash. Unclear. I'm not sure what to expect there. Sam Laporta, I feel like we've got him in at 7% ownership, 10% chance of being optimal. Obviously the Lions have just been
so expensive
facing the Bears. Yeah, he's expensive. But is it worth it? Do you think you're going to be clicking Sam Laporta?
I have his elite card in Rainmaker, so I'll probably just play that and move on with my life. I doubt Sam Laporta is going to be somebody at 5,800 that I get to a lot. He's appealing. He's been one of the better tight ends. He's priced $5,800 for a very good reason. I mean, it's Kittle and then it's Laporta. Those are your 2 most expensive tight ends, but I can get the same type of target share in Trey McBride. I can get the same type of target share or touchdown expectation in Drake Ferguson, who's had 17 targets in addition to a touchdown in 3 straight. So this is hard for me to pay $5,800 for Laporta on a team that we know with 2 healthy running backs. They want to run the football a lot. They should be able to run the football a lot here in this spot. And I think for me, that just creates this chasm where Sam Laporta is kind of a luxury item. Will I probably have him in a Goss stack or 2 along with Amon-Ra? Probably, but that's about it for me.
All right. I like the leverage there, and it's a nice spot. Bears a little bit of a pass funnel defense. So I think I'll get my guess is I'll be over the 6% of the field, but I'm not going to be jamming him in 30% of my lineups. I think I did last week. Last week, Laporta was one of my highest owned players and let me down in a big way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is just something. Yeah.
But that's the thing, is that a tight end who is 2,500, this would be the case for talking about a 2,500 tight end, allows you to get to everybody else. And 7, you're not disappointed by it. 7 at 5,800 is the apocalypse. You can't survive 8. I guess he had 8 fantasy points. I thought it was 7, but Sam Laporta, 5,800. It's just, I straight up, Kincaid, I have projected for more than Laporta. I think that McBride more than Laporta. This is going to be very hard for me to land there.
All right. That's fair. All right. Are we ready to talk top stacks? Do you have any other tight ends you want to shout out?
Nope. That is it. Top stacks is fantastic this week. Again, Rams. Hey, there you go. Good talk.
All right. You just want to play the Rams, and they look great in the top stacks tool. So that is convenient that they look so great in the top stacks tool. As you can see, Jordan has it up on the screen. That's 1.8% ownership going to Matthew Stafford, 7% chance of the Rams being the top stack. So yeah, that is a great one. Is that your top stack of the week? Do you want to, any others that you want to throw out there that you really like?
Relative to ownership, it is. I mean, Miami, 22.3% top stack percentage, but you can see that average salary sitting next to them, $8,000. You're going to need that ceiling for it to work out for you. That is for sure. That's where I think Houston and Arizona get steamed up. I do find it fascinating to see Houston has an 11.3% percentage of being the top stack, and then Arizona sitting there at 4.4%. That is fascinating to me. I guess San Francisco's a team we haven't really talked about a lot during this program.
True.
You got Deebo Samuel back, and it was all systems go. 34 points. Everybody besides McCaffrey getting in the box, which was something to behold. That's for sure. But Brock Purdy in our ownership, currently the highest owned quarterback, because against Tampa Bay, this is just a spot where they're giving up 267 yards through the air per game, second worst at the NFL, giving up everything you'll want to every position, except for just running backs running into the back of the line. But San Francisco, they can run so many different styles of offenses with the skill position players that they have. Getting Deebo, who's kind of the Swiss Army knife of football, back into the mix. I'm curious where that top stack percentage lands at the end of the week. For me, it's just hard to know who it's going to be on any given week. I mean, Kittle and Ayuk, Ayuk didn't even really go completely nuts last week. Don't know if I'm going to land there as much as I normally do, but now people are finally starting to get on this thing. Last week could have been the week, but again, you needed Dak. So it is what it is.
Yeah, you really did. Yeah, I mean, some interesting spots here, as you said. The Rams, Miami, both look great. Houston looks great in the top stacks. So I'm realizing, and we need to close the show, so we can't spend too much time on this. But we barely talked about Dallas. I guess we talked briefly about CeeDee Lamb. We talked briefly about Jake Ferguson, but did we even mention Tony Pollard this week after he was chalk last week and failed in a big way? It feels like with Dallas in Carolina, this is a spot where we should have interest in various pieces. Are we completely out on Tony Pollard? Is that why we're not talking about him? He just didn't stand out at all in the tools. Just funny. They have a great matchup against Carolina, and suddenly we got Pollard at 14% ownership, 13% chance being optimal. So I guess he's just unspectacular in the tools, but just funny because he was that was one of the first things I noticed this week when I looked at the slate was, oh, Dallas has another cake matchup against Carolina. They should be able to absolutely smash. But I guess we talked about some of the parts of it.
Yeah, right. I mean, Lamb and Cooks, I think, is going to be the preferred way. Lamb's, Cooks, Ferguson, people are going to do that. I don't completely hate Tony Pollard the way everybody else does. I mean, the Carolina Panthers, second most fantasy points given up to the running back position on the season. So, Tony Pollard is really inefficient this season. They're also doing some weird stuff schematically where they're not allowing him to run to the outside.
Right.
What Philly did is they started calling plays to fit DeAndre Swift's skill set. He doesn't like to run between the tackles. He likes to run on the outside. And now, without Kellen Moore there, you're going to see some change in this offensive scheme. One thing they're doing is they're just running Tony Pollard into the back of the offensive line. A lot of inside carries, and that's never going to be what you want for a back who was explosive pre-injury the way Tony Pollard was. Maybe he's just not as explosive as he used to be, and he's just kind of a functional running back now, and Dak is taking more of the work. So I think there's a lot to try to mine out of that situation. There's no doubt, though, that Dallas, I think the reason we haven't talked about them is it's just kind of a clear cut, if you can get to them, if the prices allow you to, you should probably have some shares.
Yeah, that's a good point there. It's just they don't really stand out, but they're all going to be great individual plays.
And no run backs again this week. Same thing I said last week. I had zero New York Giants. I will have probably zero. I doubt I can get to Thielen at this kind of a tag. 7,500. Bryce Young is terrible. Yeah.
All right, Eric. I think that'll do it. And any final thoughts?
No, this is fun. It was good to talk ball with my guy, Neil Orfield. Obviously, the data, we have that Sims deal going right now. Promo code Millie, 20% off. That's really good stuff. But otherwise, yeah, we stuck the landing here. Luffy and I generally go an hour and a half. So I know you were trying to fly and get everything done, but we were crushing it. We got everything moving. Just smash the like button for my guy, Neil.
Okay. Yeah. Go follow Eric on Twitter at Eric Lindquist. Follow me at PlayerQDFS. Take advantage of our deals. We have fantastic deals right now. Prize Picks. It's in the link in the description of this video. 20% off for whatever package you want with the Millie code. Link in the description of this video. Hit that like button on your way out. Thank you guys very much for watching. Good luck this weekend.
Skol, baby.